Hello, my name is Phil. I'm the rector of the Draycott and Lem Valley Benefice. This is my Sunday sermon for the 9th of August 2026. And our reading this morning comes from Matthew chapter 5. And we're going to read verses 21 to 26. You have heard that it was said to the people long ago, "You shall not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment." But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who says to a brother or sister, "Raca," is answerable to the court. And anyone who says, "You fool," will be in danger of the fire of hell. Therefore, if you are offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar first, and then go and be reconciled to them. Then come and offer your gift. Settle matters quickly with your adversary who is taking you to court. Do it while you are still together on the way, or your adversary may hand you over to the judge, and the judge may hand you over to the officer, and you may be thrown into prison. Truly I tell you, you will not get out until you have paid the last penny. I don't have a great track record when it comes to supporting rugby teams. I started supporting Newport RFC in the late 1990s, just in time to watch them go an entire season without winning a single league match. They fared slightly better the following year, reaching the dizziest heights of second bottom in the league. But once you're committed to supporting a club, you're committed to supporting a club. You follow them through thick and thin. And it's certainly been meagre rations on the success front for most of my time supporting Newport. So, as you can imagine, there was a great sense of excitement and delirium in my family when they somehow reached the Welsh Cup final in 2001. It was special and it was historic, and so we marked the occasion. Tickets for the final at the Millennium Stadium were duly bought. We splashed out on the latest shirt for everyone to wear to the match, including my grandmother. I'll never forget her coming down the stairs on the morning of the match in a silk Jack Fair blouse, and the consternation in my dad's voice when he said to her, "Why aren't you wearing the Newport shirt we spent 40 quid on yesterday?" To which she replied, without any sense of irony, "I didn't want to look conspicuous." Needless to say, she did look conspicuous in her silk blouse amongst 72,500 other people all dressed in rugby shirts, but she seemed quite oblivious to that. The rest of us in our rugby shirts could instantly see who each person in the stands was rooting for. So when Newport did win the match and we won our first trophy in 24 years, I found myself shaking hands with and hugging complete strangers. I knew exactly who to clap on the back and celebrate with, and who to shake a hand and commiserate based on what shirt they were wearing. The shirts don't make you the supporter of the team, but they do show you who you are supporting. My grandma was supporting Newport in her silk blouse. She just didn't have that outward sign to show everyone else who she was supporting and where her loyalties lay. This morning at Willoughby in our service, we'll be baptising Penelope. And it's also a summer joint benefice service where I tend to go a little bit rogue and a little bit off lectionary. So what I thought I'd do with our talk this week is explore the sacraments a little bit, because baptism is a sacrament, which we'll talk about, but also so is communion. There are two Anglican sacraments, baptism and communion. They're both happening in this service in Willoughby. So I thought it'd be interesting to talk about that this morning. Because you see, much like a Newport RFC rugby shirt, the sacraments are what the Book of Common Prayer calls an outward and visible sign of an inward and spiritual grace. In other words, in the same way that a Newport shirt might tell you that someone comes from Newport, Baptism can tell you that this person belongs to the Church of Jesus. And in the same way that a Newport shirt can tell people that you're prone to stand on the terraces at Rodney Parade and shout encouragement to Newport, taking communion can show people that you are committed to following Jesus. And I think there's something really rather wonderful about having a baptism service and a communion service combined, because these two sacraments complement each other. Baptism is a powerful reminder that God's invitation is open to all of us. Penelope is only 3 months old, so she's not had long enough on the earth to discover a cure for cancer, to win a World Cup, or to win a Booker Prize. But God still offers her a place in his church. Before she even has the ability to speak, she's given a seat at the table. Her parents and her godparents make promises and speak for her because she isn't yet able to speak for herself. And I think for me, this reflects the very heart of the Christian gospel. And I think it's important to say this because unfortunately, people get a little bit confused about the Christian faith sometimes. Because sometimes we get it into our heads that being a Christian means following the rules, about being a good person, and about believing the right things. But in baptism, particularly when we baptize a 3-month-old, we were reminded that actually the Christian gospel isn't really about us. It isn't about what we have and what we haven't done. It's about a God who loves us and calls us into his church. It doesn't matter if we haven't done anything to earn it, maybe because, like Penelope, we're only 3 months old and we haven't had chance. But actually, even if we're baptized later in life, it might be that when we're older, we feel like there are some things we've done that we're not proud of, and we think they should make us ineligible to be part of God's kingdom and to be part of his church. But the point is, whether it's a baby or whether it's an adult, God loves us, and so this invitation is there for all of us. Baptism is an outward sign of that call of God to be welcomed into his church. And we are welcomed into his church without needing to submit a CV, without having to attend an interview. That offer is just there, and that is the heart of the sacrament of baptism. Communion, on the other hand, is slightly different in that it's often reserved for those who are ready and willing to respond to that invitation. Baptism is done to you. I will baptize Penelope. Communion, on the other hand, is something that you voluntarily partake in. That action of taking the bread and taking the wine when it's offered to you at the altar is a way of recognizing that offer that was presented in baptism and saying, yes, I accept that offer and I'm going to live in light of that offer. Eating the bread and drinking the wine is an outward sign that that offer that baptism points to is being accepted in your life. The key thing to bear in mind with the sacraments is that what makes them special, it's not the water, it's not the bread, it's not the wine, it's not even actually the words. What makes them special is the stuff that's going on unseen on the inside, rather than the obvious stuff that you can see on the outside, which is something that Jesus talks about a lot. And he talks about it in the reading that we read earlier. That reading is part of the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus is teaching his disciples what life in God's kingdom should look like and how he wants them to live. And throughout this sermon and much of his teaching, he's very clear that what he cares about the most is where your heart is at. That is more important to him than anything else, even the things that maybe look good or sound religious. He says, you have heard that it was said, you shall not murder. But I tell you that anyone who is angry with brother or sister, in other words, don't murder, of course don't murder, but simply avoiding murdering people isn't really the goal. Jesus wants to deal with the anger the bitterness and the resentment that can take root in our hearts long before anyone is harmed outwardly. The religious leaders of Jesus' day were very good at looking the part. They knew the right prayers, they wore the right clothes, and they kept the rules. So they could congratulate themselves that they hadn't murdered anyone and assume that they were doing just fine. But Jesus looks past appearances and into the heart. And he asks them a deeply uncomfortable question. Sure, you haven't murdered anyone, but have you ever been angry with someone? Or have you ever been sharp with someone? Have you ever nursed bitterness against someone? Have you ever wished someone would just get out of the way and not bother you anymore? And that's where the rugby shirts come back in. Newport shirt doesn't make you a Newport supporter. My grandmother proved that. She was every bit as committed to Newport wearing her silk Jack Vere blouse as the rest of us were in our shirts. But I think the opposite can be true as well. Someone can wear the shirt without really caring that much about the club at all. Perhaps it was just bought for them as a present, or maybe they just like the colours. I actually got my first Newport shirt a few years before I started supporting them. And the reason I had a Newport shirt was that it was reduced to $7.99 and I thought it looked nice. So perhaps if you saw a photo of me in 1995 wearing my $7.99 Newport shirt, and you put that photo alongside me in 2001 in my $39.99 Newport shirt, you might assume that I was a hardcore fan in both photos. But the inward reality would be completely different despite the external appearances. From the outside, people wearing the same rugby shirt look like supporters of that club, but only they themselves know what that shirt really does or doesn't mean to them. And Jesus says our faith can be like that. Two people can stand side by side in church. Both can sing the hymns. Both can come to the communion rail. Both can say all the right words. And outwardly, they look exactly the same. But Jesus isn't fooled by the shirt. He sees whether our hearts are full of love or resentment, forgiveness or bitterness, trust or mere habit. And that's why the next part of the reading is so striking. Jesus says that if you're bringing your gift to the altar and you remember that someone has something against you, first go and be reconciled and then come and offer your gift. Notice what he's saying. Worship matters. Coming to the altar matters. But God isn't interested in us simply performing the outward acts while ignoring our broken relationships. He wants worship that flows from the hearts of people that have been changed by his grace. As I say, Penelope will be baptized, and when she's baptized, her parents and her godparents will make promises on her behalf, and the church family will promise to support and encourage her as she grows in faith. She's receiving the outward sign that marks her as belonging to God's church. And that is a gift of grace that she hasn't earned, and she doesn't need to earn. God loved her before she could understand any of this. And so we can welcome her into the church with joy and confidence, because baptism is a reminder that Jesus loves her and invites her into his church, just as he does to everyone listening to me now, whether they have been baptized or not. But after we do the baptism sacrament, we will move on to the sacrament of communion. And this is a sacrament that asks us how we're going to respond to that invitation that God extends to all of us, that we articulated in Penelope's baptism. Have we slipped into simply going through the motions? Have baptism and communion become familiar habits rather than joyful reminders of God's grace? Are there resentments that we've been carrying that Jesus is asking us to let go of? And if there is, maybe that's something we need to do before we go and receive communion, so that when we do next receive communion, we do it as people whose lives are matching that promise that we are keen to embrace. These sacraments are our metaphorical Team Jesus rugby shirts. So let's wear them like we're going to a cup final with joy and excitement. But at the same time, if you'd rather wear a silk blouse instead of a rugby shirt, that's absolutely fine. Just make sure that you are backing the right team. Whatever you are wearing externally, make sure the internal is in the right place.